there have been some really positive surprises, as well as obviously all of the negative ones that you might expect that are associated with that kind of loss. But the positive ones have been around focus and the idea of living today, and that we need to do what we need to do now. And actually, the opening of my book, the dedication is, "This book is dedicated to Jinnah, who abruptly left too early, cracked me open, and whispered, 'Today, now.'"
Joining us today is Laing Rikkers. She is an award-winning author, entrepreneur, and executive coach with 30 plus years of leadership experience. Her book, Mourning Leaves: Reflections on Loss, Grief, and Connection, offers a moving, practical guide to finding resilience and meaning after loss. And we're gonna kind of dive into a bit of that today, especially that resilience piece of it. And I'm just trying to fix something over here on my computer screen. There we go. And now I'm going to, without further ado, bring her up onto the stage and welcome you, Laing, to our podcast. Welcome.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I am, been looking forward to this conversation because we do have something in common, not necessarily something exactly nice in common, but it's a bond, I think, nonetheless, because we both lost a sister, and we both wound up writing a book as well. And I think, yours clearly came directly from it. Mine was sort of the idea came to me a couple months before my own sister passed, and I wound up dedicating the book to her. But I would love for you to share with our audience a little bit about your journey and how this came about. Losing your sister, and then how that wound up leading to the book.
Absolutely. So I lost my sister very suddenly in December of 2019, and she had been having some issues that were associated with sleep apnea. She hadn't gotten treated, but I knew of her symptoms because I had been working in the field. And unfortunately, she died very suddenly, and we were quite shocked. She was 46. She had a young daughter. And the good news was that it was before lockdown, and so we were all able to get together and mourn her and have a big service and that sort of thing. But then in March, as everyone experienced, we went into lockdown and entered that period that was really very frightening for everyone around the world, with not knowing what was happening with COVID. And so the grief combined with the sort of existential fear that we were all experiencing and being at home more, I just found that I needed to do something creative. And I read the very classic book, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and started doing something that she suggested every morning, which is writing morning pages, which is writing 3 pages before doing anything else. And you're sort of in that liminal state between dreaminess and wakefulness. And I started writing, and it was a really cathartic experience for me. And I hadn't intended on writing a book. That was not something that I started out doing, but the combination of writing and spending a lot of time in nature and reflecting on everything that was going on led to poems that I originally typed up with the idea that I would give them to my children. I had been really aware that my sister had left too soon, and that she had a daughter who I knew that she hadn't been able to share everything as a mom. The girl was too young to have done that. And so I was thinking a lot about my kids, who were teenagers at the time, and what had I not imparted to them. And so I typed up what I had written, and one thing led to another. And monthly book. And so it's been a really nice journey for me.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's I love The Artist's Way. I have that book, although I never got very far into it, except for like the morning pages as well. So I I don't always do the full 3 pages, but I do try to get maybe at least 2 in. Depends on the size of journal I'm working with.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Yeah, it's like, if it's the wide rule, yeah, I'm going to do 3 full pages. If it's skinny, maybe we can. I don't know. She probably wouldn't approve of that, but well, and actually, I'm going to ask you this because even though I know we're going to get into some other stuff, but just of the creative process, did you find that if you do like get into like that 3rd page, that really is where things start to kind of come out? Because I know for me, sometimes it's just kind of mundane things, the first page or so. But as I keep going, that's when some interesting revelations come through. Did you find anything that ever happened to you?
Certainly I had that happen where the beginning would just be, I don't know what I'm writing about. And you're particularly when you're starting, you really don't know what to say. It feels awkward.
Yeah.
And then by, and different days were different, I guess I found sometimes really when I was in the heart of writing that if I got very sort of still and quiet, that I could sort of hear something that I wanted to write. So I learned to sort of listen to myself in a different way. And when I stopped the sort of chatter in my head and the judgment and all of those other noises that can distract, I found that clearest voice was able to come through some days, not every day, but
yeah,
that was a very special thing to be able to experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good reminder for us, is that, because I often, I talk with my clients, and I've said this on the podcast before, that I always recommend journaling as a great way to be able to really connect with your higher self. But not every day is going to have those tremendous revelations. Someday it isn't going to be that, and I might be just listing all the things that I need to get done that day.
That's absolutely my experience too. Yeah.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about, because you mentioned it, it's definitely, I can't even, imagine having to deal with, the loss. And then of course, and then COVID, when the world shut down, that was so much fun. And dealing with that too. But how, how has really, I know we talked before, she was your younger sister. How has that loss impacted your life? Were there any, maybe even like surprising ways that you weren't expecting?
Well, the whole thing was a surprise for sure. And it has impacted my life. And like we were saying before we hopped on here, that there have been some really positive surprises, as well as obviously all of the negative ones that you might expect that associated with that kind of loss. But the positive ones have been around focus and the idea of living today, and that we need to do what we need to do now. And actually the opening of my book, the dedication is, this book is dedicated to Jenna, who abruptly left too early, cracked me open, and whispered, "Today, now." And I've really tried to inhabit that and be much more thoughtful about time and, my ability to do things, and hoping to have it mean more and be impactful and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate that. And I'm hoping my cat is not being picked up on the microphone, because he's all of a sudden decided to meow, and yeah, to join the podcast. It's like, no, kid, go away. I love you, but yeah, this is not the time. Well, the focus of our podcast is really on helping women over 50 design their life their way. And we were even kind of even talking a little bit about this at the beginning too, before we came on. What do you think is the biggest hurdle that women definitely over 50 and probably maybe even a little bit even over 40 as well face when it comes to living life on their terms?
Everybody's situation is different, but I think that having financial independence, I think about that quite a bit. I have a daughter who's in college, and talking to her about choosing paths that give her the power to make her own choices. And I think that that's really important for women in particular. I think men often are culturally directed that way, but I'm not sure that historically women always have been. And so I think to have that sort of independence to make choices, because we all have to, pay the rent and food on the table. And then also there's an element of confidence and building upon skills and experience that one has developed over time. And at a more spiritual sort of personal level, understanding who one is, what's meaningful to them, how they want to express themselves, what they want to do and impart to the world that's real work. I don't think that, I don't minimize that part of it as well. It's one thing to want to do something, but knowing what that is often the hardest part, and to get very clear about one's goals, and often doing it isn't as hard once you know where you want to go.
Yeah. Do you think your book has served part of that purpose for you a little bit?
Definitely. I spent my career in business. I worked in private equity for about 20 years, and I have left that, and I am now advising some small businesses, and I'm on the boards of some nonprofits, so Feeding San Diego and another organization called the Empowered Endings Foundation. So I'm trying to put my time and energy into projects that I find really meaningful and important. And sort of my husband has a term of, is it of ultimate consequence? And so that's definitely been, important to me. And then my book itself, I actually have a second edition of the book that is coming out in March.
Good.
It's about 20, it's the same core book, but it's 20 pages longer, and it has a new preface, which opens up the aperture on loss beyond just death loss to all of the kinds of losses that I think we're experiencing culturally and particularly right now. I think politically, our identity as a country, the environment, our sort of intergenerational losses we're experiencing. And then it talks about the things that have been helpful to me, sort of with 5 years experience looking backwards. And so the book is still called Mourning Leaves, but the new subtitle is Cultivating a Life of Beauty, Meaning, and Joy. So
I like that.
It's moving from, of course, we all have loss and we all are dealing with our own types of grief, but that we also have ways to take care of ourselves and do the work to ultimately make the decision to choose joy. And I differentiate that from happiness, which I think is sort of sparkly and more fleeting, but really true, deep joy that can come from living, aligned with one's values and taking care of oneself and things that matter to them.
Yeah, I think that, and I think it's so important that you do talk about that. Yeah, grief isn't just about losing a person, because sometimes it's about losing an identity. Because
Absolutely.
empty nesters. Suddenly, they were the person who was, especially if you're a woman, you were the mom taking care of the kids. Now your kids are off on your own, and it's like, oh, what am I going to do now? Or maybe either maybe lose a spouse not to death, but to perhaps divorce. And so now again, it's like now I've read about what happens. Sometimes you lose friends because they were friends with the spouse, maybe. And so now they don't want to be associated with you because they still want to be friends with the spouse. And so now you're going to have to go out and get whole new friends. So I noticed two things. I want to get back to empowered endings. So remind me about that, because
Okay.
I'm really, I loved what that is all about. I want to get involved in that. But I also noticed that you and I, again, we have something in common, not to mention the fact that also my sister passed in December as well, 2 days after Christmas. So there you go. But I noticed that you do grief retreats, and I'm actually going to be hosting one myself in June. So I love that. Again, we got synchronicity here. So what prompted you to start doing that, and how have you already held one, and if so, how was that experience? Because I'd love to know, just selfishly.
Absolutely. So because of my book and the people that I was working with and what I found to be important from the people who helped me through grief, I ended up doing a grief support specialist training at the University of Wisconsin. And I just find that grief work is some of the most deeply satisfying work that I've ever done, because you are with people who are at their most raw, most vulnerable, most open. And that to me is exciting. I tire quickly of people's affect and pretenses and other sort of things that can get in the way of meaningful conversation. And so I've actually never done a full-blown retreat. I have been a part of a number of series of workshops that participants come for a few hours, either every month or every week. And I'm in the middle of a group right now, and I just love doing it. I work with another grief specialist she's a death doula and has been in the space for a long time. And I learn a lot from her and the way that she engages with people. And I learn a lot about myself, and I learn a lot from the people who are participating. And everybody's grief is different, but the opportunity to share and connect is a real honor, and it's very special. So I'm fortunate to get to do it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, well, the first just a couple months after my sister passed, I was fortunate enough to be invited to just a wise women retreat. It was just a 1-day thing, but they had these wonderful like a talking circle, and so everybody got around, and I of course broke down because it was just a couple months after my sister passed, but it was so wonderful to be held in this container where people just understood, and they respected me, and I could it was okay to let my guard down and show my emotions. And I think that's what's it's so needed, that we need to be there for people, to be able to understand them and be with them wherever they are in that stage. Because you're right, grief does go through some interesting phases, and it can still sneak up on you just when you think maybe you're kind of you're starting to kind of come to terms with things, and you're you feel like, okay, you're more of an even keel, and then
another wave comes.
Something, who knows, it's either a date, or maybe you hear something on the radio, who knows, or maybe it's just for whatever reason, it's just like, whoa, okay. Yeah. So,
Yeah, the retreats or the workshops that I've been doing, so this is my book, what it
oh,
looks like. This is the
lovely.
current version, and it's filled with poetry and art. And so we actually use the book as part of the framework for the discussion.
That's
And
nice.
then we give people time to write themselves. Some people draw or have other sort of creative forms of expression. And it's a very nice way to organize the discussion and give people different entry points in, because some people are more guarded, some
Yep.
people need a prompt to open them up and get them started. And so we read some of the poems, and it gives us also a starting point to talk about grief is, the obvious sort of sadness and negative emotions, but it also drums up so many other emotions and so many reflections on ourselves that it's good for people to realize that that is part of the grief process as well, to think about the isolation or the envy or the anger or all of the other emotions that bubble up partly because of the door that's been cracked open from.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I can imagine, that, losing your sister, when she's such a young age. And, I know when I was 18 when my older brother passed, and it was a sudden thing. He died in his sleep. So it was like, what? And he's only 33. And I was really not necessarily even angry at God. I was just angry at the situation, and especially even when I got older and got married and had kids, and I'd be like, oh, he would have been such a good uncle. So mad, that you're not around, and like, so yeah, those types of emotions I think they're normal. So,
Right. And there's unresolved business, and
yeah, that too.
angry with my sister. Sometimes my parents are both still alive and getting older and needing help. And where are you? You're supposed to be here to help me with this.
Yeah, exactly.
About this. And so it does come out. Sometimes it's funny. Sometimes it's deeper things that you didn't even know were still packed under there. And so but that's, as you said in the beginning, that's one of the silver linings, to get some of it up and out, and to use, I found, to use exercise as an important way to sort of move the energy, to be able to talk about it, find either friends or counselors to be able to address it with, creativity. So, I call it talk it, walk it, write it. Those are sort of the activities that help to move the energy, the emotion, the experience, so that then you can integrate it and make sense of it, and hopefully find some of the silver lining.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to ask you about, some practical ways to use, simple creative rituals, to process emotions and spark clarity. So yeah, so you mentioned, definitely, obviously writing is one. Are there any others besides, speak it, talk it? Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, there's an organization called the Foundation for Art and Healing, and they have some interesting programs and materials, a lot of research that came out of the Harvard School of Public Health. And they show that if you do something creative, and it can be drawing, writing, knitting, I mean, it really any form of creative expression, and then one ultimately has what they call an artifact. So you have your piece of art, and then you've gone through this sort of flow state of creating it, and then you have it, and then you have it to share with somebody else. And a lot of times you're able to express something that maybe words can't quite capture. And the opportunity to share it with someone else creates the connection. And the connection is very critical to the healing. And so I think that art for sure, and creativity. And it could be dancing, it could be singing. I think depending on, the inclination of the person, it could be a lot of different things. It's a very important and helpful way to take all of the energy, roll it around, pull it apart, put it back together, and then create something new that's generative and positive and forward looking. It's a very valuable exercise.
Yeah. I definitely can relate to that, and I love doing all sorts of different creative things myself. But what and I kind of have an idea about it, but I want to see what you think about it. What potential pitfalls might there be for someone, especially in sharing something with somebody? What do you think might be something that maybe somebody needs to be just kind of mindful of?
Well, not everybody is comfortable talking about grief and loss. And so I think choosing the right person, and it could be somebody who's gone through it before, it could be somebody who's professional. It also could just be a matter of testing the waters and seeing if somebody has an appetite for it that particular day or moment. And I think that when one is vulnerable and raw, they share a lot, and you want to be careful that who you are sharing with also is trustworthy with your most intimate and most delicate parts of yourself. And so that's probably the biggest risk. I think I think really the biggest risk is not sharing at all. So getting isolated and thinking that what one is going through, that you are the only person, that's probably the biggest mistake. And finding the ability to find other people and feel seen and heard is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, so good. Yep. Okay. It was kind of what I was suspecting, but it was good to hear somebody else confirm it for me. If you decided to redesign your life your way today, what, if anything, would you change?
Well, I am doing it. So I think about this. Okay. I think about this question a lot. As I mentioned, I had been in private equity for 20 years and I've left that. And so I'm in this transition year or two of where do I really want to put my time and energy and what's important to me. And certainly putting out the second edition of my book and having the opportunity to talk to people about things that resonate for them in terms of their life, their losses, has been one of the most meaningful things. You had also mentioned that you wanted to talk about Empowered Endings. That is a place where I've been putting quite a bit of my energy. It is a nonprofit that focuses on caregivers and providers around end of life subjects. So it could be anything from dementia, aging, and then all the way to end of life as in death. And it's really caring for the caregivers and ensuring that they have resources, best practices, education, community, and that they are able to take care of themselves because their work is taxing and draining. And so to ensure, we're talking about, end of life care physicians and nurses, and hospice workers and death doulas and caregivers in the home and family members, all, dealing with different pieces of this puzzle. But I saw some number in the paper the other day that there are more caregivers of elderly than there are of children in the country right now. And so it's, it's a lot of the population, and a lot of people really have questions. They don't know where to go. They don't know what choices exist. They don't know where to get good information. And so Empowered Endings is working to create a national network of people and resources that where people can turn to get information and become part of a community around the subject that matters to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, it does make sense because baby boomers were this huge generation and they are retiring every day. There's statistics about how many of them are there. And, or even the Generation Jones, which I've learned that technically, I guess, is what I'm not a baby boomer, even though I used to excel at Trivial Pursuit, the baby boomer edition. But I am just that kind of tail end and not quite the next one, whatever that is, Gen X.
Gen X, yep.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's so important because when my sister was going through her cancer journey, I live in Florida, she lived in Arizona. And so I would go out there as often as I could to be with her when she was going through the treatments, but I wasn't always able to do it because I was raising 2 kids at the time, had my business and a husband. And but I would periodically get a phone call from one of her friends going, when are you coming out again? Can you come out soon, please? We love Michaela, but we need a break. And, and they were just, she wasn't married. She didn't have any kids. So she was relying on either her friends or me to help her, with doctor's appointments and just even making sure she was eating and taking her medications and things like that. So yeah, it's rough. And I was so grateful that we did have hospice support in the last, last 2 months, because they're wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people. Yeah. And so when I saw that organization, I was like, this sounds wonderful. And I'm definitely right up my alley and want to see what I can do to support them as well, because I think it's so needed. And it's just going to be continuing to be necessary as we go forward. Yeah. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you about that you'd like to share with our listeners today regarding either grief or loss, or just dealing with transitions and in life that goes by?
At the end of my new book, I talk about some things that I think are really important for our ongoing resilience, because like it or not, loss is coming at all of us. And so there are sort of 3 foundational elements that I think are really important. Sleep. I think we all are aware of the importance of that and just how much better we handle things when we are well rested. And it can be hard to get good sleep when one is dealing with traumatic, stressful, difficult things, but to really make that a priority and focus. Also, so I call it sleep, eat, steep. So sleeping, then eating. And under the umbrella of eating, I'm actually talking about sort of everything that we put into our body. Of course, healthy food, balanced food, not letting loss become an excuse to, only eat ice cream, or also not to drink too much, not to numb ourselves with other kinds of drugs, alcohol. And I like to think of, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And if you start adding other substances, it makes the line longer, and it just makes it harder to get through. And so it's very tempting. And I understand, that second glass of wine or whatever it is, but the more one can be thoughtful about taking care of themselves in that way, I think is helpful. And then the third foundational one I call steep, and that's depends on the person, a spiritual practice, a meditation, a religion, but to really lean into it and to be able to put themselves in a greater context, and one of a bigger universe. And I think it's very helpful when one is sort of in the dark hole of a tough situation. So I think those three things, are the foundation, and then the and then the walk it, talk it, write it, which we talked about. And then I think the final piece that really helps one come out of it is serving others and paying it forward and being able to do things to make life better for other people. It gives us meaning and purpose and a sense of consequence. And so I encourage people who are struggling a little bit to look at ways that they can get outside of themselves and help someone else. And it often changes the perspective a bit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because when you can put your focus on helping someone else, it really does. It changes your focus, and also sometimes it can, depending on who you're helping, might even give you perspective like, okay, well, maybe my life isn't quite as horrible as I thought it was. And, this other person is really going through something. And if I can help them, that's really good. And I would just actually add, because I do love the eat, sleep, steep, but I think the other thing, and it's something that you are providing, and I know I do as well, I think is support. So whether that is one-on-one, whether it is joining a group, being in a community of people who are going through what you're going through, there's all kinds of places to find that. There's Meetup, there's Facebook, even though sometimes it drives me crazy, but there are lots of groups there. But knowing that you don't have to go through this alone, or you can, there's organizations online that you can reach out to for support. One I really believe in is NAMI. It's a National Association, something for mental health anyway. And because sometimes you can, grief or just, again, even through transition, it can be, bring, maybe not necessarily go into full-blown depression, but it can be something that can be strong enough that you don't feel you have to go through this alone. There's resources out there.
I completely agree. And professional resources are, as you say, there are lots of ways, shapes, and forms of counselors and therapists and all the way to psychiatrists, but also, as you say, a good support group, or even a great friend who
absolutely
really it well. I think the connection piece is, as we were saying earlier, is critical to the healing. Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, cool. Well, this has been a pleasure, and time has flown by, but I would like to have you share with our listeners if there's some place that they want to get some more information from you. Maybe they want to check out one of your workshops. Where can people learn more about Laing?
Well, probably the best place is my website. So it's 𝙒𝙪𝙧𝙥𝙪𝙧. That's one of the nice things about having an unusual name, is you can get like your website and your Gmail. And so 𝙒𝙪𝙧𝙥𝙪𝙧.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn and Instagram in particular, but I would love for people to contact me from there. I have an events list, and my book, as I mentioned, is coming out in March. And so I'm going to be doing a book tour. And so I will have all of the dates and locations listed there. So if people around the country, I would love for them to come and introduce themselves. So appreciate everyone reaching out when they can.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. I really did appreciate getting to know you a little bit better, and look forward to continuing to connect with you on LinkedIn, because that's where I'm hanging out. Instagram, I don't know, can't get in there. So I tried, but it's like
no problem. But yeah. I really appreciate being included, and look forward to staying in touch.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode and it has inspired you to design your life your way. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's important links. Share this with a friend on social media and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And let me know what you enjoyed about this episode in that review. I really love hearing from you. And I want to remind you that you're never too old to start a new chapter.